Hello, it's Blue Orange 22. In this video, I'm going to do a men's rights activist review of President Donald Trump. Now, as I said before, I don't want this channel to become political. I don't want it to be about Democrats, Republicans, or Trump or Biden. But I do feel that it's becoming more and more difficult to separate politics from society. But in this video, I'm just going to talk about Trump as related to men's rights and specific men's issues. Now, just something to clear up first quickly. There's a misconception that the men's rights movement is a right-wing or conservative ideology, and it's part of the alt-right and all that, but that's not true. MRAs are not pro-Trump or anti-Trump. We're not on Trump's side or against Trump. MRAs can be Democrat, Republican, pro-Trump, anti-Trump, liberal, conservative, left-wing, right-wing, communist, capitalist. I'm part of several MRA communities, and MRAs are pretty much all over the political spectrum for left-wing and right-wing. A lot of people have this confusion where they think MRAs are part of the Proud Boys and the whole alt-right movement, and that's just not true, which I've talked about in past videos if you want to go back and check. But anyway, let's look at some things that I liked and didn't like from Donald Trump. Now, there was a story a few years ago that kind of put Trump on the MRA radar, and it was this here, when Trump was talking about how it's very scary to be a young male in America. And he was talking about this, if you remember. It was the controversy around Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos released reforms on the rules for sexual assault in universities in the United States. Now, I did actually agree with this for the most part. It was very controversial, and a lot of people thought that it was hurting victims of sexual assault. What she did, in effect, was just say if someone is accused of sexual assault, if a student in university is accused of sexual assault, they're allowed to defend themselves, and they're allowed to present their case. And you can't just expel a student without any evidence. And a student, if they're accused of something that serious, they're given a chance to give their side of the story and defend themselves. And a lot of people were saying how, oh, well, this is harmful to victims of sexual assault, and it's giving power to those who are responsible for sexual assault. I don't really think that's fair. I think all you're doing is saying, look, if you're being accused of something, you're allowed to defend yourself. So that mostly I agreed with. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos on Wednesday formally announced new protections for those accused of campus sexual harassment and assault, a controversial move that appends Obama-era guidance that she had argued denied due process to the accused. The charges, which critics argue may discourage victims from coming forward, include provisions under the federal law Title IX that allow those accused of harassment or assault to question evidence and cross-examine their accusers. Victim advocacy groups, however, argue that the new regulations diminish survivors and discourage them from reporting sexual assault and harassment. Fatima Gosgraves, president and CEO of the National Women's Law Center, said that if this rule goes into effect, survivors will be denied their civil rights and will get the message loud and clear that there is no point in reporting assault. Again, I just don't think that criticism is very fair or reasonable, because all this new rule does is give someone who's accused a chance to defend themselves and present evidence in their own defense, which I think is pretty basic and fair. So I don't think it makes much sense to say that this is denying those who are assaulted of their basic civil rights, because it's really not what it does at all. It just gives people who are falsely accused a chance to say, hey, listen, I'm innocent and I have evidence to prove that. So overall, I agreed with that. Now, something I didn't agree with at all that mostly did affect men was his alimony tax law changes. This was a few years ago. It kind of flew under the radar in the media. Basically, what he did was he made alimony no longer tax deductible. Take a look, and then I'll kind of explain sort of what it means. The ex-spouse who pays alimony will no longer be able to deduct that expense unless the divorce settlement takes place before December 31st. It's a big deal if you're paying $30,000 a year or far more in special support and you're in a higher tax bracket. Alimony was treated as highly favorable. And by the way, I would say it's a big deal to someone in any tax bracket, but I'll explain why in a bit. Anyway, alimony was treated as a highly favorable, above the line tax deduction that reduced your taxable income even before your adjusted gross income was calculated. You can take above the line deductions even if you don't itemize. Beginning January 1st, those who divorce and pay alimony will no longer be able to take a federal income tax deduction for the alimony that they pay, ending a decades long practice. Okay, so what does that actually mean? Basically, people can get tax deductions if they show that they have special costs in their lives. For example, like you have two kids, right? That's expensive. That's a cost. So you get to get a tax deduction. You don't have to pay as much taxes. Or you can show that you need to buy stuff for your job. I'm a school teacher and I have to buy crayons for my students. Or I'm a construction worker and I have to buy extra tough boots and gloves and whatnot, for work. It's like, okay, you can show that you need these things for work or for your life. The government lets you save taxes and you can pay less taxes to offset that expense. Alimony used to work that way. If someone had to pay their ex-spouse, let's say $2,000 a year, whatever it is, after the divorce, they could claim that as a cost and then they would save that amount on their income tax. But now Trump's new rule said, nope, you don't get to do that. The reason why I don't like that, and the reason why I said I don't think it just affects higher tax brackets, is because alimony is very expensive for a lot of people. And if you're struggling to make ends meet and you're working paycheck to paycheck to pay rents and to pay for your food and just to live, and now you already are strained financially, you have thousands of more taxes to pay. I just think is unfair and doesn't make a lot of sense. And this is something that would mostly, not only, but mostly affect men. So this is something that, as an MRA, I did not like at all. So this last one, I mostly did not like it. Um, it is a bit mixed. I'll go into it. It's this story here. It's about the draft. Trump administration appeals ruling finding that the male-only draft is unconstitutional. This means that Trump was against making the draft gender neutral. So there was a lawsuit about how it was sexist to only draft men, and Trump said no, he's against that lawsuit. So basically said he does think the draft should be male only. Let's take a look at the article. I've linked it below along with everything else. The Trump administration has moved to defend the male-only military draft, appealing a federal court ruling that selective service registration is unconstitutional because it discriminates based on sex. The appeal on Monday, so he wasn't just against the lawsuit, he actually appealed a federal court ruling. So he was actually pretty active about this. The appeal on Monday comes as the plaintiffs in the case step up their legal efforts to force the government to either force women to register for the draft or to eliminate the mandatory draft registration entirely. Now, that last line, or to eliminate mandatory draft registration entirely, is something to take a note of. So the plaintiffs, two men who say they're more likely to go to war because women are excluded from the draft eligible pool, have asked a Houston judge to expand the ruling with an injunction ordering selective service to put men and women on equal footing. So the arguments that because only men are in the draft eligible pool, they're more likely to be drafted, is one of those things that's uncomfortably true. But, this is one of those things that's kind of mixed, because the thing is, MRAs don't want women to be drafted, right? We're against the idea of men being drafted. It's not like we want women to be sent to war as well. And what's disappointing about Trump's decision here was that one line saying, or, one of the options, or get rid of the draft altogether. And Trump just kind of totally ignored it and didn't really do anything about it when I think he could have done more. So this was something that mostly I didn't like and I thought was disappointing. And believe it or not, that's pretty much it. As far as I can remember, those are the only gender-specific laws that would fall under the category of men's rights that Trump was involved with, at least that I'm aware of. It's kind of funny for all the attention Trump got for being so divisive. In terms of actual laws that he passed, he didn't do many laws that were specific to people's race or gender or how they were born. Like, he didn't do many discriminatory laws um, based on a person's identity compared to what a lot of people expected he was going to do. And I think you're going to see Biden is going to do more laws and actions that legally distinguish people based on their gender or race or how they were born than Trump did. You're going to see more laws that make a difference in how someone is treated based on how they were born than what Trump did. But that, of course, remains to be seen. Now, when it comes to Trump, I'm just going to say this. Um, I think if you 100% agree with everything he did, or you 100% disagree with everything he did, I wouldn't agree with either of those. I do think it's true that the media was at times very dishonest about him and made him look worse than he really was, and sometimes blatantly lied about what he did. But I also think that he did and said a lot of things that a good leader wouldn't do. And he said and did a lot of things that made situations worse and caused a lot of tension and a lot of division. So I read people who defend Trump and I read people who criticize Trump, and sometimes I agree with one and sometimes I agree with the other. And that's kind of the case, I think, for most political movements or political figures. Um, I do think I might get kind of dragged into making more political videos as time goes on because it just is becoming so intertwined with day to day life. But for now, I'm just going to leave it at that. Do I think I would be a better president than Trump was? Definitely, 100%. So that's that.